All right. 93. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. The whole concept, the whole concept and purpose of this video is to point out why it is easier to not accept things, or sciences rather, mathematical sciences, such as astrology, numerology, Kabbalah, all of these various forms of the occult. There is a reason why these sciences are denied, because it shows you the inner workings of the universe. And I will explain to you why. And I talked a little bit about this on my Telegram channel, which the link can be found in the description of each and every video. Also, I have moved everything that I was doing on Patreon to the website. So on the website from now on, you will see the monthly astrology breakdowns, but you will also see the monthly numerology breakdowns as well. So I just posted about 5 or 6, new articles and another video on the website for the members. So I'm going to be giving y'all a lot more content. And also for the people who are interested in these things, you can also check out the website if you want, the astrology courses or any type of divination services. So we'll just get that out the way before we start. So the title of this video is called How to Be on the Top of Your Game Every Day, and why there's so much flux in nature. There's a reason why some days you feel good, and then other days are a lot more challenging. Right? Some days you may feel, you could say you feel self-empowered, while other days you have to search for this power. It's not just readily available to you. This is because the Earth is affected by each and every planet in the solar system, as well as the asteroids, which are considered mini planets. So because the Earth is affected by, you could say, the fixed stars, the wandering stars, as well as the many planets. The wandering stars is just another way of saying the planets. As we know, we also have planetary days, and we also have planetary hours. We also have lunar mansions. So astrology is very vast, meaning a layman or a commoner will not be able to grasp the complexity in these sciences because it requires you to tap into your higher senses. You cannot approach astrology or the occult as a whole the same way you approach, you can say, school, the same way you approach a job, the same way you approach, just running and structuring your life. You have to tap into what is called gamma brain waves. Because on the previous videos, we talked about alpha brain waves, we talked about beta brain waves. But above beta brain waves, you have what is called gamma brain waves. And this is how we tap into our astrological senses. This is where we become more aware of how we are affected by not only just the people around us, but also the factors that are invisible. You can say the invisible forces, because we don't necessarily just see the planets unless you are actually searching for them, and most people are not searching for the planets. Most people are looking down into their phones, into their devices. They're not looking up. It's easier to just pull up an app if you want to know the weather, if you want to know what's going to happen in the future. That's why we watch the news, because all they're doing is making conjecture. What may happen. But before we had all these mainstream news outlets, we had the philosophers, the astrologers, as we call the wise men, that gave us all of this information because they were simply in tune with the astrological dynamics, meaning they were able to predict the future, something that is a lost art, or it's really, people are really only concerned with that when it comes to, making money. If you know what's going to happen in the stock market, for example, you could potentially make lots of money. That's just really as far as it goes at this day and age, because people have such a vast attachment to finances. And this is due to the culture we exist in, because we see how people are treated when they have money, when they have status, when they have influence. So why wouldn't you want to be an influencer when you see the way they're treated? They get preferential treatment. They are not treated like the commoner. So of course people want to have that luxury and have those privileges, because we don't see the value of, you can say, being an astrologer at this point. Why would you want to be an astrologer when you can be an influencer, when you can be a celebrity, when you can be all of these other things? Because these are the people that we exalt. These are the people that we worship now. These are the false gods and the false goddesses of the world. That's why we call them stars. You think it's a coincidence that these people are considered stars? It it's like the science is hidden in plain sight. So of course you're paying attention to the celebrities or the so-called stars, the earthly stars, and we have no concern with what's going on with the actual stars. So when we want to know what's going on, when we want to know what trends are current, when we want to know what's really going on in the world, we're looking at celebrities. We're looking at earthly stars. And we have given up our ability to actually do these things ourselves. Or the people that actually does these things, we don't necessarily value them the same way we value celebrities, who, as we see, they just act roles. They play roles. It's not that we are actually into these people for who and what they are, because we truly don't know who and what they are, because that part of their lives is private. We only see them when it's time for them to work, when they're doing movies, when they're acting roles, when they're playing out fantasies. That's how we judge these people. The same thing with musicians. It's not until they make a song that you like that you actually begin to care. You're not actually concerned with their day-to-day activities. We're only concerned with essentially their effect, the effect that they have on us. So of course, the actors and the actress within your favorite movie, to be able to follow these people on Instagram, for example, or Twitter, now we become followers of earthly stars instead of following the actual stars. So there's no coincidence that these things are occurring. As you see, this whole field was created by occultists. All the people that run the industries are occultists. They know exactly what they are doing. And this is why I say it's easy to deny. Let me say it this way. The only astrology that people acknowledge is, you can say, the zodiac signs. That's just really as far as it goes, or the horoscopes. That's as far as it goes. So of course people would know their sun sign and basically their compatibility with other signs. And then they may pay attention to the horoscopes. But for the average person, that's as far as it goes. Sometimes it's accurate, sometimes it's not. You can literally download apps, based on your sun sign, based on the horoscopes of the day, so on and so forth. Which, is fine if that's what you're into. But what I'm bringing to your attention is astrology is a lot more vast and a lot more complex. Because before the scientific revolution, which was in the 1700s, you had to learn astrology and you had to learn astronomy. This was mandatory if you were striving to be someone of value when it comes to this astrological data. This is why most people don't study the vastness of astrology, because this is like going to a college course. This is when you have to now pay for your education. So now the education is no longer free. Now you have to pay for it. And then you learn these things at the same time. So you're not just learning about the attributes of the stars and the mythology of the stars. You're also learning about the external components. Basically, you're not just learning the esoteric science, you're also learning the exoteric science. The exoteric science is astronomy, and the esoteric science is astrology. These sciences didn't become separated until the scientific revolution. That's the key word, science. Because science is directly connected to Mercury, but astrology is connected to Uranus, and Uranus is an outer planet. Currently, we are going through a Mercury retrograde, which started on the 21st of this month, 2 days ago. And a Mercury retrograde lasts for about 3 weeks, and it happens about 4 times a year. So whenever a planet goes into Mercury, whenever a planet goes into retrograde, it appears to be moving backwards. Mercury is currently in Taurus. So if you observe Mercury, then Mercury will be appearing to go back in degrees. So if it's 13 degrees, it's going to go to 12, 11, 10, 9. It's going to appear to be moving backwards until it starts moving forward again. And that's another thing that people will pay attention to. So we may pay attention to, again, the astrology signs, the zodiac, the horoscopes, and the sense of the Mercury retrogrades, because people, are aware that the Mercury retrograde has factors. Things kind of get quirky. Things kind of get wacky during this time. Things don't flow as smooth as they normally do. There's a lot more hiccups in the system. So people don't necessarily acknowledge these things because they want to. It's just that it becomes quite obvious that there's something going on here. Just like it becomes quite obvious, when you're dealing with certain zodiac signs. Because it becomes very obvious what element rules over people. So if you are a Gemini, for example, that is the air element. So when you're interacting with a Gemini, you are interacting with the element of air. When you're interacting with a Cancer, you're interacting with the element of water. When you're interacting with an Aries, you're interacting with the element of fire. When you're interacting with a Taurus, you're interacting with the element of earth. So when you have interactions with the earth signs, they tend to be more, very cautious and calculated with how they manage their finances, for example. You can say Aries would be more of, or fire signs would be more of risk takers. The water signs are more intuitive, so they go off of a feeling and vibes. Then, of course, the air signs are more intellectual. They're the thinkers. So this becomes very obvious. When you are interacting with people, you can see, okay, I see why you are this way, because you're naturally in tune with this particular element. And this also goes to show that the elements are more than just what we think they are. That's why when you study the occult, now fire becomes desire, water becomes emotion, air becomes thought, earth becomes memory. So even the elements have a esoteric and also a exoteric ability. So I'm just going through all these things to go to the main point here, which is how to stay on top of your game on a daily basis. Meaning we must first understand that every day there are planetary changes occurring. Every day there are new aspects that form between the planets and the mini planets every single day. Every single day there's conjunctions that are going on. There are oppositions that are going on. There are sextiles that are going on. There are trines that are going on. And, those are just the major aspects, and also squares. But then you have the many aspects, like semi-squares, like quintiles, right? So on and so forth. Goes on and on, depending on how deep you choose to dig into the science. So once you become aware that every day new aspects are being formed, this gives you an idea of why you feel different on a daily basis. So it doesn't matter how healthy you are or how unhealthy you are. It doesn't matter your position. It doesn't matter your rank in the world. Because these things affect us on a psychological level. These are psychological changes that are occurring on a daily basis. So when we are not aware of these invisible changes, of course we begin to point to external things that may be occurring. Right? What I mean by that is there's a reason why some days you feel well rested after sleep and some days you just feel on the edge. For example, during this Mercury retrograde, we're going to naturally feel more on the edge because Mercury is purifying itself. Whenever a planet is in retrograde, it is purifying itself. It is going through, you can say, its karmic debt. It is cleansing its karmic debt. So it has a more spiritual expression. So, for example, normally Mercury is all about, travel, vehicles, devices like cell phones and tablets and all these things. Mercury rules over all these things, communications, media, so on and so forth, right? So whenever Mercury begins to cleanse its karmic debt, now these things begin to, again, get a little quirky, a little wacky, right? Things don't flow as smooth as they normally do. This is due to Mercury cleansing its karmic debt. So it begins to interrupt things that normally flow smoothly. So not just on an external level, but also on an internal level, because everyone has Mercury in their chart. You may have been born during a Mercury retrograde, because some people, of course, were born when Mercury was going through its retrograde. Then some people were born when Mercury was direct. So these energies we carry with us anyway. But we begin to understand these things the more that we realize that we are not just our sun sign. If anything, we are more of our ascendant. Because that really determines your personality. Your sun sign doesn't determine your personality. Your sun sign does not determine your outer appearance. Your sun sign doesn't determine how you interact with your environment. Those are attributes of your ascendant. So really your sun is really your essence, your creativity, your self-power. That's really how you feel from the inside. But that's not necessarily what people interact with. So you may feel like a Taurus inside. But if your ascendant is, for example, Aries, people are going to see the Aries. When you interact with people, they're interacting with an Aries. They're viewing an Aries. That's what they're going to see. That's how you're going to interact with your environment, and that's what's going to shape and mold your outer appearance. So even though that's how you feel inside of yourself, so when you read the attributes of Taurus, for example, you can say, okay, that's me, that's how I feel, that's how I go about doing things. But again, that's not your personality when it comes to what other people interact with. When people have interactions with you, they're not interacting with the Taurus. It is you that is interacting with the Taurus. See, astrology helps us to differentiate the multiple aspects of consciousness. So basically, how you see yourself is not the same way that other people see you. Those are two different aspects of consciousness. Astrology helps us to understand that. Now, we get into that, the more you begin to study psychology, but even that only scratches the surface because astrology is a system of psychology. Meaning, if you understand astrology, you will understand exactly how the brain works. You will understand exactly how the mind works because this has already been decoded by the ancients. All the things that are so-called modernized has already been decoded. The only thing they did was remove the esoteric and separate it from the exoteric. That's the only thing that's really has changed. So that's why astronomy is still accepted while astrology is not so much accepted. So if we begin to understand these things, we begin to realize that every day, once again, there are new aspects being formed. Certain planets may be in retrograde. Certain planets may be at war with each other, and certain planets may be in a very harmonious union with each other. And all of these things will have an effect on our psyche. So the more we are paying attention to these daily changes, these hourly changes, these monthly changes, these changes that are happening constantly, we can adapt and adjust ourselves according to these changes. And this is how you stay ahead of the game. This is how you begin to predict what will happen before it even happens because this is the original science. This is what makes it different than conjecture. Because you're not just guessing, because you're looking at mathematical components. Because astrology is based on mathematics, it's just high math, trigonometry, algebra. You're dealing with shapes and all type of things, calculus. All of these things that we learn can be applied to astrology. So there's no time for guessing. We have to guess when it comes to everything else. You have to guess, well, I wonder what type of day it's going to be when you're not looking at the stars and the planets. Then you have to take a guess. But for most people, they have not grounded themselves and centered themselves, meaning it's up to you to have a good day or a bad day. Because if you are aware of the aspects, if you are aware of the planetary changes and the planetary cycles, if you are aware of the proper seasons, like we have just entered into Taurus season, there are some people still on Aries time, and then there's other people on all types of different times, but they're not in tune with what's actually going on. So the more you are in tune with what is actually going on, life no longer becomes, or life is no longer a mystery to you because you're no longer playing this guessing game of what may happen or what could happen or what even should happen. You just simply adapt and adjust according to what actually is happening. Because we already have all 12 of these signs in our chart. So if we are in the season of Taurus, you have Taurus in your chart already. So whatever Wherever Taurus is in your particular chart, whether it's a planet, whether it's a house cusp, or whether it's just in your chart, invisible, that energy will be brought to the surface because that is the dominant force. So whenever the dominant force is activated, it's going to activate certain attributes in your charts. That's why we call it the transits, meaning the current alignments of the planets are called the transits. So when I say the sun is in Taurus, that is the transits. The moon also is currently in Gemini, for those who are keeping up with the moon, which I do on the YouTube membership. So if you are a part of the YouTube membership, you know every time the moon changes signs, I'm always giving a breakdown about it just to help people to stay in tune with what's going on so you can properly make these adjustments. So everything I'm talking about, I'm already doing behind the scenes. And again, that's why I also do the daily tarot readings in the Telegram channel. So even if I'm not making videos, I'm always writing literature on a daily basis in a semi daily basis with the astrology. But every day I'm pulling out the tarot card and I'm giving a description of what's going on. And I've been doing this every day since last August, and we're in April now, so I've been doing it. I haven't missed a day. So I literally haven't missed a day for months and months and months and months, because I feel it is necessary for us to keep up with the tides and the cycles, because it will be only to your benefit if you are aware of what is possible versus what you think you should be doing. See, a lot of people are just guessing, but we cannot put our life in the hands of randomness. What could, what should, or what would happen. That's not enough. We must make calculated decisions and calculated risk. Everything has to be calculated. Everything must go through the mathematical formulas, because that's what's really going on with the planets. These are all mathematical formulas. So the more we understand that this is just a game of mathematics, and mathematics gives us what we call the third eye. So when you see visions and all these things are based on math. All these things are based on what's actually going on currently. Even when you dream, the type of dreams that you have will be based upon the current planetary cycles. So none of these things are ever random. All these things are based on what is actually occurring. So the more we understand, like, okay, the more in tune I am with planetary attributes, the more that we can understand, okay, that we can actually predict the future. The future is not random. As we say, the future is not set in stone, because you can always make a decision to do or not to do. So of course the future is not set in stone, because your decision is still your decision. We all have free will, right? We all have free will, so can't nobody make you do anything you don't want to do. You will always be able to make your own decision. But the information you have access to is based on how deep you want to study. So again, it's just some people who are just aware of what the sun is doing, right? So apart from that, friends, there are some people who are just aware of what's going on with the sun, and other people may be aware of what's going on with the moon. Other people may be concerned with what's going on with the ascendant, so on and so forth, right? It just depends on how deep you want to dig into the science. As you see, the science is very vast. This is on a college level of thinking, meaning you essentially have to be a college graduate. Not that you have to actually go through college, but this is just the type of mentality you must take on. Okay, this is on the level of a college graduate. When you truly understand how vast this can go and how you are able to process all of this information. So that really determines how far you go. Is okay, how deep can you go in your thinking? Can you look at the entirety of your chart and begin to formulate images and pictures of what message that the planets are trying to convey to you? That's not something that everybody can do when they're looking at vast information and then they got to make sense of this. They're looking at 22 points, they're looking at 10 planets, they're looking at 12 houses, and they have to try to figure out what's going on here. It's not easy to do, and I'm not going to lay here and tell you that this is easy to do. That's why I take people years and years and years to master this. Like it's basically like a whole college course. This is not something that you're going to master overnight because it's a lot of information to process. And again, that's just a chart. That's not including the actual aspects because we know there's four dimensions of astrology, meaning you dealing with the planets, you're dealing with the signs, you're dealing with the aspects, right? Those are the three dimensions. Then you have to also deal with the houses. So you're dealing with planets, you're dealing with signs, you're dealing with aspects, and you're dealing with houses. So all that information is available to you at all times. So when you're looking at the vastness of what you're considering, it takes time to be able to process all of these levels, meaning you may have to start off with just looking at planets and just learning the attributes of the planets because you have to learn the attributes of the planets. Then you have to learn the attributes of the signs, right? So again, the sun can be in Gemini, the sun can be in Taurus, the sun can be in Aries. That's two dimensions because you have to know the attributes of the sun, then you have to know the attributes of the zodiac sign. Then you have to know the attributes of the houses, it's 12 houses. Then you have to know the attributes of the aspects. So you have to know all four of these dimensions to then comprehend, okay, what possible message is being conveyed to me. And then you're processing all this information, then that will turn into a decision. Okay, based on this information that I have access to, this will determine the decision I make. This will determine how I go about my day. Let me pull up my chart or let me pull up the transits and then make a decision because now again you're making a mathematical calculated decision. Again, you're not guessing, you're not just looking out the window and you're just looking at the sun. It seems to be hot today. It seems like it's going to be a good day. This is what the average person is doing. They're just looking out the window and then they're making a judgment based off of what they can see with their eyes. You, on the other hand, you begin to make judgments based off of what you don't see. That's why you have to pull up your astrology chart. You can't. You're not just going to be able to see it. That's why you have to pull up the transits. That's why it requires software. So this is you just making a more calculated decision, right? What's up, Tangela? Greetings. It's the same thing with the stock market. It requires technical analysis as well as fundamental analysis in order for you to make a decision. So you have to process all of this information and make a decision based off of these complex mathematical formulas. Again, which is on a level of a college graduate, maybe even a PhD level. Because if you try to explain these things to someone they can even be a student of astrology, but they're still limited on how deep they can go. Meaning you have to go into the depths of your own soul because you realize, okay, this is not just something to make money off of. This is not just decision making. That's a part of it. You're actually beginning to learn the depths of your own soul and how you actually operate, meaning these things are occurring in real time, which is unlike reading a book. Like a book is a certain time capsule in time, you can say. It's a certain time period. the language that's being used. If a book was written in 1939, for example, they're going to be using language from 1939. So you really have to take your mind backwards in order to fully comprehend. And it's, of course, it's going to be advances that have been made since then that you're not going to be able to calculate because, for example, there are certain astrology books that were written before the discovery of Pluto. So older astrology books is only going to go up to Neptune. And then books before that, they will only go up to Uranus. And books before that, they will only go up to Saturn, which are the seven visible planets from the Sun to Saturn. Then eventually we discovered Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So I'm saying all these things to say we are always making new advancements. We are always finding new asteroids. New things are always being discovered, especially in the 21st century. So we have to stay up to date because there's new discoveries being made on a daily basis. So this is why astrology grows with you. It's not something that's outdated because there's new discoveries being made, there's new attributes being applied to things, and you always have a vast amount of information that you can pull from. For example, because I'm just speaking about the basics, then you can take it a step further because you also have harmonics, for example. You have solar returns, you have lunar returns, you have midpoints. Now we're going into even more. Again, you got the lunar mansions. So, and these are different aspects of the world, meaning when you study astrology, you are studying the entire world because each dimension of the world has added on to astrology. Meaning there's a difference between Eastern astrology and Western astrology. How the charts are even calculated are completely different. Meaning the sun in Taurus is, that only applies to us here in the West. And the East, the sun is actually still in Aries. In the East, the moon is still in Taurus. So their astrology requires us to go one sign back, which may take you for a loop, especially if you look at your Western chart and you look at your Eastern chart. So if you are a Gemini Western wise, you may be a Taurus on your Eastern chart, which requires you to have to completely change your view of what you thought you was. And this is what I mean by, this is why most people just leave this stuff alone. This is why it's just easier to say, okay, I just don't believe in it. Because as you see, the deeper and deeper you go, meaning everything that you just learned, meaning if you were studying astrology just from a purely Western basis, and then you begin to study the Vedic, now you have to completely change your perspective. Because now you're being introduced to dimensions that you were not familiar with. All this time you've been thinking that you're a Gemini and come to find out, okay, that's just from a Western perspective. That's not the entirety. Then if you go to Chinese astrology, for example, now you're a whole different being. You may be a horse. You may be a rabbit. You may be a dragon. So you see, depending on where you study, you're going to get an entire different perspective. Because when you study Chinese astrology, your sign is not based on the month you was born, it's based on the year you were born. So you see, it's a whole different way of calculating. They're going based off of the year. They're not going based off of the month. So their astrology is not based on the seasons. You see? So this is why I say it's just easier for people to just leave this stuff alone. It's easier just to deal with zodiac signs and horoscopes and maybe dealing with transits, and that's really as far as people go. Because once you realize how vast this science is, it's like it kind of gets overwhelming if you are not properly trained and prepared to look at all of this information and make sense of it. So that's why it's just easier to say, okay, I don't want nothing to do with this. It's the same thing why people have to go to college for 6 to 8 years to become PhDs, because you have to slowly process all of this information. It just gets more advanced, more advanced, more advanced, layer on top of layer, on top of layer, on top of layer. So when you're able to process this vast amount of information, now you can like, okay, I can see what's going on. I see why I had to learn this first, then this, then this, then this, then this. I see why this came from this part of the world and how this came from that part of the world, how that became this, how that became that, because you also are studying history. So you're not just studying the mathematics, you're also studying history. You're also studying mythology, because all of the planets and stars are connected to mythology. So as we see, so not only do you become a historian, because when you really become an astrologer, you have to go back in time, because you have to, this goes into mundane astrology. Now we're dealing with the different schools of astrology. You have four different schools of astrology. You have the natal astrology, which is basically what we've been talking about. Then you have mundane astrology, which, or otherwise known as political astrology, which deals with the actual cities. So now instead of dealing with individuals, now you're dealing with the cities and the countries and the states. So now you're looking at world charts. And then you have honorary astrology, which is how you get the quick answers, quick yes or no answers, which a lot of people have not even heard of. Like, okay, how does astrology give you quick yes or no answers when astrology is vast? Well, it's a whole school of astrology called honorary astrology. Then you have electional astrology. Electional astrology tells you when it is the best time for you to start new things, a new business, a new project, a new relationship, whenever, because all these things are based on what is currently going on. This is why I say none of these things should be a guessing game. Meaning, if you're really deep into the science, there's a reason why relationships live on and or die. Meaning, depending on, for example, the time you marry a person, that will determine whether that relationship lasts or not. It really has nothing to do with the individuals. It has more to do with the timing. There's a certain time to marry. So if you are not in tune with the proper time, then you're destined for failure, meaning there's a certain time to start a business. So essentially now we're going into success, meaning your success is really based on your timing. It doesn't even have anything to do with what's actually occurring. So you see, once that's why these things are not really talked about that much. That's why most people just stick to. That's why most people just stick to just the natal astrology. Because once you realize that natal astrology, mundane astrology, honorary astrology, electional astrology, once you see that, and again, I'll just be on here about 10 more minutes, and we're not going to make this extra long. Once you realize everything is truly timing, like we've been hearing this forever, right? Everything is based on timing. Well, where do you think they got that from? What do you think that comes from? That comes from astrology. That's a whole school of astrology. That's why people hire astrologers, because they want to know, okay, when is even artists, meaning all these people we look up to, have to hire astrologers. So, because these are the questions that you would ask an astrologer. When is the best time for me to drop my album? When is the best time for me to start this business? Meaning these are questions you're not just going to know the answer to. These are questions that require calculation, mathematical calculation. When should I get married? When should I start this business? When should I drop this album? When should I start this new job? All these things will determine your success or failure. While we're thinking in our mind, okay, I'm just going to work hard. I'm going to give it all I have. Well, you can be working as hard as you want, give all of your energy, and it still becomes a failure just because of the time you decided to do it. Because it's not based on how hard you work. That's why you see people just having easy success, because that's also based on timing. You see people just breezing right through. People's albums are just selling and they ain't even doing much. Right, what's up, Ty? Peace. This is why we see ease with people than other people just working their asses off and still not getting the type of success that they feel they deserve. Because they simply started at the wrong time in the wrong season. That's why certain relationships, just love at first sight, and people are just, they can stay together for 50 plus years. Then you got other relationships, they don't last more than 2 years. It ain't really have nothing to do with the individuals, it's based on the time that you chose to get with the person. But you see, these are things we don't really want to accept. The average person is not ready to accept that. They don't want to accept that, okay, timing will determine my success. It ain't about how hard you work, because we always complain about what we don't have. Well, we didn't have the proper resources, or you may have met the wrong person, or you may have been with the wrong business partners, or you may have signed with the wrong record label, so on and so forth. We give all these answers, all this speculation. That's why, excuse me, that's why we have conspiracy theories. Why did this person's album flop? Why did this TV show get canceled? Why did this other TV show just have vast success and it became number one at the box office? You think it's just a coincidence, or it's because of the timing that it was released? It was guaranteed to be successful. This is truly how nothing becomes something, because if you simply do things in accordance to timing, you can have little resources, you can have little funding, but it is based on your timing. You can say even the YouTube channels, this applies to everything. Let's just say you're thinking about getting into YouTube or being a content creator, whatever you decide to do. The timing matters. That's why, as you see, some people go viral. Their first video goes viral. Then other people, they got to make 100 videos to go viral. Other people, they got to make 1,000 videos to go viral. You think it's just based on how hard that they work? Not necessarily. It's based on timing. So I'm just giving you a quick introduction to why all of these things matter and why these things are ignored for the most part. Because you have to come to accept the reality that everything is based on the law. The law is the lema. So I say the lema is not a religion. This is the law of the universe. Meaning everything is about exactness. Everything is about just, and that's why things are not just, they are exact. So that's why life appears to be unfair, right? Why did this person have to work hard their whole life and this person just had success just given to them? Excuse me. Because that person understood timing, or they had somebody on their team that understood timing. It's just that simple. So if you truly want to understand how these things work, then you must understand, okay, this is all based on time, and I need to be very calculated in everything that I do. But that requires discipline. That requires courage, right? That requires bravery. That requires you to take calculated risk that you may not see the results of till later on. So everything must be calculated. So that's why you see most people just out here just living their lives. Hopefully it works, hopefully it doesn't. They're just living in the moment. Because it's easy to do that. It's easy to say, I'm just going to go with the flow. Well, don't be upset when success doesn't go your way if you're just going with the flow. all, you're not making any calculated decisions. You're just exercising your free will. That's why the whole purpose of the Lima is to exercise your true will. And your true will is being in alignment with the stars, with the universe around you. Because if you are in alignment with the universe around you, you know that, okay, I need to do things at a certain time. I can't go off of my free will. My free will is going to have me going in circles. It's going to have me working harder than I need to work. It's going to have me doing things that are just completely unnecessary if I simply chose to do it at a different time. And that's essentially the message of the day here. That's the only point I'm trying to make here. This is why these things will continue to be ignored, because this shows you, this breaks down everything. The whole secrets of the universe is just being revealed for those who understand what's being said here. You must be on time. Most people hear that, okay, they think about clocking in. Okay, I need to clock in at 9 a.m. I need to be on time. That's just one aspect of it. But you see, there's greater aspects. There's more to the story than meets the eye. And with that, I bear peace. 93. Love is a law. Love under